um, either went to pray with somebody or thought about going to pray with somebody. But either way, he did not come right home. So I did this and I ran until I started to stagger and I started to fall. And it was like, you're not finished, you're not finished. And I thought, I have to do the horse thing. I have to do the horse thing. And the Lord had made it clear to me, yes, you are a horse. You're a horse. I don't know what that means, but so I locked myself in the bathroom and I was so gone in the spirit by this time. I knew what I had to do, and the only thing I cared about was finishing this race, doing what the Lord asked of me, completing what He gave me to do. That's all that mattered to me. It was for Him, it was for my husband, it was for my children. It was for the end of me. So I went in the bathroom and it was like, okay, I got to do this. And I pressed, and the weird thing was, I hardly felt it. It felt like a little sting across my skin. And I thought, okay, I got to get it deep enough that the salt can get into the flesh. I can't just like do the surface thing. I have to get it deep enough. So I went over it a few times. And then I put I cleaned up the best I could, cleaned up the axe, got the salt, put it in, and nothing. I felt nothing. No pain, no adrenaline. It's like, oh no, I've done this for nothing. And I thought, okay, well, look, peroxide, hydrogen peroxide, that has got a sting, right? Got the hydrogen peroxide, put it on, nothing. Okay, one more thing, all I can think of, I got to do rubbing alcohol. I got the rubbing alcohol, put it in, nothing. I thought, oh crap. Okay, well, I got to clean this up. So I got cloths and stuff, put them in my underwear over the wound, and just, cleaned it up the best I could, cleaned up my legs because blood was running down my legs. It was on the floor. Cleaned everything up, put it in a garbage bag, a grocery bag, tied it up, put it in the garbage. I had cleaned up the axe, shoved it in behind some stuff in the cupboard so nobody could find it, put the salt away, like just cleaned it up so nobody would know what I'd done, or, no one would freak out. Didn't really think about the blood, on my underwear. But anyway, okay, so I got out of there and I just kept running and I kept running. And then I was starting to get really weak. My legs were starting to give out. I would fall, but it was like, no, you're not at the end. Get up and go. Get up and go. So I just keep getting up, keep getting up. Finally, my husband came home and he saw the blood and he says, "What have you done?" And he panicked and he called the ambulance. And this is all part of God's orchestrations. Don't think I haven't gone through this in my mind over and over and over again afterwards, asking the Lord for clarity and understanding and wisdom as to, like, did I go insane, Lord? Like, am I like just out of my mind? Anyways, okay, back to the story. He called the ambulance. By the time the ambulance got there, I was bent over double and still trying to run, telling myself and forcing myself to stand up and then going again and pushing and pushing and pushing through the lactic acid, pain in my legs. And then finally I fell, and at that point, he was on the phone, I guess, he told them that I was I was running out of strength. And I fell in the hall onto my knees, and that's when the paramedics arrived. They came up the stairs, and one of them said, we're taking you now. And I said, for the love of God, please let me finish. I'm almost there. I'm almost done. And he said, no, we're taking you now. I said, please, for God's sake, please. And the other fellow, bless his heart, he said, she needs to finish. Let her finish. I said, oh God, thank you. And my husband said, yes, she needs to finish. At this point, I was on my knees and I could not move my legs. My legs, I could not move them. I said to God, where is the finish line? Just tell me where's the finish line. He said, it's the doorway right ahead of you. It was about maybe 3 or 4 steps ahead. So I cried out to the Lord. I said, God, help me. God, help me, get up on my legs. So I had to use my arms on the wall and push myself up onto my feet. And somehow I got on my feet. I don't even know how. And then I threw myself at the doorway. I just willed my legs to move. They moved. I knew I was through the doorway, and I collapsed on the floor. And I said, okay, you could take me. It felt like they wrapped me in a tarp and took me down to the ambulance. I could not move my arms. I could not move my legs. I could not move my head. I was almost delirious, but fully aware of everything that was going on. They were talking to me. They were asking me things. I was trying to answer. I could hardly speak the words. I could hardly get them out of my mouth, but I tried my very best to be cooperative. And even at one point, the guy said, she wasn't near when we got close to the hospital. Sorry, my leg's gone to sleep. Speaking of legs, he said she wasn't cooperative. She didn't move her arm when I asked her to. And I thought, you never asked me to move my arm. So I'm thinking, I don't want them to think I'm uncooperative, right? Or not with it or whatever. But anyways, so I start to try to lift my arm like this, right? And so I do this. And then they noticed. So that was okay. But they went through all these questions with me. I can't even remember. I guess I must have hit an artery because apparently the blood spurted all inside the ambulance. Sorry. Anyway, so they packed it all up and got me to the hospital. And then they moved me into the emergency. No, it was the loading area. So they got me off the ambulance and I was waiting in the loading area for a place in emergency. They needed a room for me. And so I was waiting. And while I was waiting, the Lord said to me, you're mine. That's all I wanted to hear. All I wanted was Him. I wanted to be with Him. I wanted to be His completely. And I wanted Him to be mine. If you remember at the end of Self video, the scene at the end was my body, and there was this opening here, and this light was coming out of it, and it was like glory. And I went over to look inside my body, and I expected to see some black stuff, like sins and stuff like that, but all I saw was pure glory, and I was like, wow, that's cool. And I felt Jesus come up behind me and look in as well, and He said, perfect, and He got in. He was my brother. So at the hospital, He said, you're mine. And at that point, I was in perfect peace. I was like, oh, thank you. That's all I wanted. That's all I wanted. And then, in the ambulance on the way there, they had talked to me about giving me tea with sugar in it and stuff to try to get my blood sugars up. And I'm like, no, nothing but water, because I didn't know if I was finished the fast yet. And when I got to the hospital, He said, you're mine. He said, okay, it's over. It's done. It's done. It's completed. From now on, everything they give to you is from me. Everything they do for you, I want you to receive everything from them. Everything they bring to you, everything they do for you, everything is from me. You take it all. It's like, okay. So, yeah, some doctors came and saw me. Oh my goodness. I was lying on the bed, and even in the ambulance on the way there, I've had 7 children. I have never felt pain like I experienced in my legs with that lactic acid just sitting in there. I imagine it was eating my muscles because it's very damaging to have lactic acid sitting in your muscles. Anyways, the pain was excruciating. I couldn't move my legs. And when I tried, or even got my husband to try to lift, because I can move them a little bit, but it was just pure pain. Anyways, I thought, eventually, when I was at the hospital, I thought, oh, I'll try to massage, and move the lactic acid up. And so I did stuff that I thought would help. But man, wow, that's pain. That's pain. And the funny thing was, I said, can you give me something for the pain in my legs, right? And they're like, I'm sorry, we can't give you anything right now. We don't really have anything that we can give you. It's like, are you serious? But I felt like the Lord said, just accept it, Whatever it was, He allowed it, so I just needed to accept it. So I was like, okay, God, just help me accept it. So anyway, yeah. So various doctors came to see me. I was breathing very heavily because there was stuff breaking down in my system that my body was trying to get rid of through rapid breathing, to do with the fasting. I didn't know till later, but my heart was giving out, my kidneys were giving out, and my liver was giving out. They were not in good shape. I didn't know any of that stuff at the time, thank God. So anyways, they had me there, and then the psych doctor came to see me. Because, it's not normal for people to cut themselves with an axe. No kidding. Anyways, they talked to me. They said they were going to admit me. Certified? They were going to certify me for a month. And she said, it's just for a month, if the doctors say that you're well enough earlier, you are free to go, right? But will you just accept what the doctors say? And I was like, well, the Lord told me to, let them take care of me. So it's like, yeah, I'm happy to stay here until I feel like I'm ready to go. And she's like, okay, good, And I told people my story, and they're like, okay, yeah. So that was the beginning of my healing. So, yeah, from that point on, it was just everything improved very dramatically. I was put into, not ICU, but one below ICU. The nurse came to get me in the emergency in that evening. He was a registered nurse, like the top level of the nurses. And he came to wheel me up. He says, we don't normally have porters come and do this, but I'm tired of waiting for you. So he came and got me himself. And by that time I had had a turkey sandwich. I have to say it was the best turkey sandwich I've ever had in my entire life. And I was only too happy to receive everything that they would provide for me. Now, they debated on not putting me right back on food and gradually introducing food, but then decided to just let me eat. So that's what they did. So, yeah. And then they monitored everything. So they put me in this room where there's only 4 beds in the room, 2 nurses per bed, one below ICU in terms of constant attention. They monitored everything. I was hooked up. I was IV, the whole deal. I didn't know how bad shape I was in. But anyways, they were taking wonderful care of me. And I felt totally at peace the entire time I was there. From the point that Jesus said, you're mine, I was totally at peace. I didn't care. I didn't care what happened because I belong to him and he is mine, right? It really didn't matter. So I had this like bubble of peace over me. And I did feel a bit spacey even coming out of it, but I figured that was a bit normal. But I still, it's almost like I'm wired differently. It's almost like I'm somewhere else and here at the same time. I can't really explain it, but no, just leave it at that. So, what else can I tell you? Well, the Lord was very gracious to me. I was in that particular room from Friday evening till Monday afternoon. So over the weekend, basically a long weekend. And then I got to the point where they didn't need me to be in there anymore, and they moved me into a room just down the hall where I had a lot of care as well and access to all these people. They would check in on me and everything. Excuse me. Um, yeah. So eventually everything, all the electrolytes, I were concerned about that. I was really super low in potassium and various other things. They monitored me constantly. Like I had so much blood taken out of me. It's like, oh my goodness, is my hemoglobin going to be even lower? Like it was, my hemoglobin was super low, um, even lower just because of all the blood you're taking, right? And anyways, they said that I did not need a transfusion, so that was good. My hemoglobin was very low, but not to the point of needing a transfusion. So hallelujah. Anyway, okay, so I was there on that floor, and I moved from the second room to a third room, which was like, had two windows with a view. Oh my goodness. One window overlooked the snake, um, that arena, the snake arena that they built in Edmonton, that I talked about on a different video. And then I had a window also facing to the west where I could watch the sunset. And I had asked the Lord, I had said, oh, it would be so nice to be able to watch the sunset and see what's happening, in the clouds and stuff. So I had a few days in that room that were just glorious. Um, anyways, the reason that I had to stay on that floor so long because they had certified me to go to the psych ward, but the psych ward wouldn't take me with my wound if it was serious. So it had to get healed to a certain point before they could move me down to the psych ward. And I'm very thankful for that because that was an experience. Oh, talk about being weirded out. If you've never been to a psych ward, it's an experience. I'm very glad that I had the experience. I'm glad for what I learned and for the people I met. I'm very, very thankful. But man, the first evening when they wheeled me down onto the psych ward, the word that came to mind was neglected. When you get to this wing of the hospital, it's the original hospital that was built in the 60s. Well, it still has all the original tile. It has the original paint color, even on the elevators there. It's this kind of aqua, like this 1960s aqua color, green, hospital green. Oh my goodness, and hospital green down the hallway. And it was like, oh my goodness, they wheeled me in there, took me to my room. It's like, oh my goodness, where am I? And then they were going to put me in a room with this precious young woman, native girl, but she was a little dissociated from reality, and she thought there was a conspiracy against her, and she was like walking through the halls shouting and saying there was a conspiracy and talking on the phone and whatever, and this was going to be my roommate. And I looked at the nurse and I said, is my dear roommate going to do that all night? And she goes, well, sometimes she does. And I just went, I see. And I just was grieved, so grieved. But I did not feel that I was to argue or anything and just accept what the Lord had for me, right? So it was like, okay. But then in about half an hour, they decided to change my roommate. Thank you, Lord. To this lovely woman um, from Lebanon. And she had come in. Her daughter had been taken to a different hospital, and she had been taken into this ward because, yeah, she had some, oh, her daughter was very, never mind, it doesn't matter. She was just a very precious and wonderful woman. And she wasn't the kind who was talking out loud and delirious and that. She slept at night. Thank you, Lord. She didn't really want the light turned off, but the nurse said, it needed to be turned off, so we had the bathroom door open a crack, and that was fine, so we managed to sleep like that. And it was quiet. Hallelujah. So I grew to love this woman and pretty well everyone else on that ward. Yeah. But as I said, I had this bubble of peace over me. So even though I felt emotions, I had this overarching, overwhelming, overriding peace on me. So a profound peace beyond anything I've ever experienced before. That previous experience where Jesus took me to see the Father and I came back with peace was only a taste. And this peace is an abiding peace. It's wonderful. Okay. So, but during this time, okay, so I'm in the ward and I ended up being in the hospital for 1 month and 8 days. During that time, my husband was not doing well. He did not do well through the fast because we were separated and he had a dependency on our physical contact. And so he did not do well through the fast. And then when I went into the hospital, he was really not doing well because I wasn't even physically there. But I understood later that the Lord had done this on purpose. There were things he needed to do in Rob that he could not do with me there. And so he separated us. And it had to be for this length of time. So it was like, well, was the cutting necessary because I didn't get that shot of adrenaline, right? But I understood later the cutting was necessary because that's how I got admitted into the hospital for an extended time. If I had not cut myself, they would have sent me home after about 10 days. And at 10 days, I was not emotionally, psychologically, physically really able to come home. But they had done all they could at the hospital and they would have just sent me home. And I thought at one point that that's what they were going to do, and I just started to cry. It's like, when I go home, I am going to have to carry the full load. Because that is what Rob is going to expect. I will not have any support if I go home now. So anyways, the precious psych people came and spoke to me and they said, yes, we understand. I said to them, I feel so spacey. I don't even trust myself to drive right now. I can't imagine myself getting in a car. I don't think it would be safe. And they're like, oh, that's totally understandable. And they said, yes, we're going to keep you here and then we'll monitor things and we'll send you home when you're ready. Right? And it's like, thank you. So, but when I got to the ward that first night, yeah, and I felt like, there was this big neglected sign over the ward. And then they told me, I said, I'd been used to, because I wanted to get myself strengthened as quickly as I could. So I would I had orderlies, or they were called constants. They were people who had to stay with me all the time because they thought I was self-abusive. They thought that that's why I cut myself, and I tried to explain to them, no, I just did it to finish what I had to do, but that really didn't make sense, and I can understand that. I mean, they come across a lot of people, they don't know me from a hole in the wall. So anyways, yeah. Oh my goodness, sorry, this video is going on way too long. Okay, let me wrap it up. Okay, I got to the psych ward that night. They said, no, you can't go down to the garden. You have to stay on the ward. Well, the ward was one hall. I said, if I want to walk, I have to just walk up and down the hall? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. So I walk up and down the hall. And all the movies, you've seen of people in psych places walking and pacing. It's like, oh my goodness, I'm in a psych ward and I'm pacing the halls. What is going on here? So anyways, thank God, first thing in the morning, I saw my psychiatrist. She is the most beautiful, beautiful, wonderful woman. I love her. I just love her. So level-headed and real, and I explained everything to her and she understood. She did give me a pointer though. She said, people noticed that you were talking to yourself when you were on the other floor, and I was, because I was trying to organize my thoughts because I was so spacey. So I would speak to myself, okay, I'm going to do this now and then we're going to do this, and I'd plan ahead, and but I didn't really pay attention to the fact that I was talking out loud and that other people could be listening to me. So anyway, she gave me a tip. She said, hey, maybe don't do it out loud. And I'm like, okay. So I had to start to discipline myself. Okay, don't do it out loud. Don't do it out loud. Anyway, yeah. So she said, well, I'm going to give you some passes, half-hour passes. And I said, okay, what does that mean? She said, well, that means you sign out in a book at the main desk in the hall. And then you can go anywhere in the hospital you want for half an hour and then come back and sign back in. And I said, how many times can I go in and out? And she goes, as many as you want. I'm like, oh, because I was so afraid I was going to get trapped like you see in the movies, right? Because truly, I was not there of my own volition, right? They had certified, the doctors were in charge. They were deciding my destiny. Of course, I had to remind myself that truly God is in charge of my life, so nothing's going to happen that he doesn't allow. So it's all okay. So that's how I came right back into peace after my thoughts kind of went that way a little bit. So yeah. So I'm telling you, I didn't spend hardly an hour on that ward. I came back for meals and that was about it. And oh yeah, they had to they had to bandage my wound every day. They had to clean it and repack it, and change the dressing and all that every day. And I had showers and I did stuff like that. Okay, so I was there probably more than an hour, but man, every chance I got, I was off that ward down, and they had a beautiful atrium, and then they also had a beautiful outdoor garden with flowers and everything, just gorgeous. So I was either in one of those two places, and then I started to explore the entire hospital, so that was cool too. But yeah, so once I got my passes, I was okay. Anyway, so I spent the rest of my time on there. I was, oh my goodness, the love in my heart is exponentially just unbelievably huge. Anyways, I'm different. I guess that's the bottom line. I believe that I've come into the place where it's Christ in me, the hope of glory. And I need to abide in him, and he's teaching me how to make sure that I abide. But we're one. We're one. As he and the Father are one, we're one. And that's what he's doing in first the man-child, the barley harvest. He's bringing us into unity. Oh my goodness, I didn't tell you, there were other young people who were there who had incredibly profound experiences as well, spiritual experiences. One young fellow had met the Father, had been taken to the Father. Another young girl had been set free from a really terrible situation in that, and she had gone into the Spirit, and she was fasting without knowing she was fasting, and just getting revelation and stuff, and she got set free out of that, but ended up in here. But that's okay, because it was a safe place. And there was a couple of others that could have been in there for that reason too. I just didn't hear their stories. Oh, and another wonderful brother. Anyways, a lot. And actually, my roommate said, she's a Christian too. She said, look at how many Christians are here. What is this? Why are there so many Christians, right? It's like, oh my goodness, God is doing something here. Anyway, okay. Cutting to the chase, I ended up coming home. I left the hospital on July 22nd. I was home for a couple of weeks. I was ready to come home, but I knew I was coming to. It was hell, okay? I'll just be honest. All the demons that could were manifesting themselves through my husband at me. But it didn't matter, because I had this bubble of peace. It's like, the cone of silence, but it was a bubble of peace. And all this stuff would come at me, and it was like it would bounce off. It would bounce off, and I'm just standing there. It's like, God, is there something wrong with me? Like, do I not have any emotions anymore? Why am I not being affected at all by this, right? So anyways, yeah, so that was happening. And on and off, right? And then he would repent, and it would happen again, and he'd repent, and bless him. I love my husband. I love my husband. Okay, so finally, because he's telling me I'm crazy and all that stuff, he said, go and talk to somebody. I said, okay, I'll go talk to Philip. Philip is our prophet friend who has been in the spirit on many occasions, knows all about this kind of thing. I said, I'll go talk to him. So he said, okay. So that night I went, and that afternoon, okay, so we're coming to the crunch, the finale of the story. That afternoon, the Lord said to me, and I had been separated from him even when I got home. I said, I don't feel like we're supposed to be together yet. I knew he wasn't healed. I went back into the prayer room. He was in his room. And yeah, that's why there was another barrage, because he thought I should be taking care of him in the way he wanted, that kind of thing. And I just didn't feel it at all. So, but that afternoon, so this would have been the 7th of August, that afternoon, the Lord said to me, do not resist an evil man. Well, this was a shift. Because before that, it was like I was consecrated. I could not, be with my husband. So, do not resist an evil man. And I thought, okay, Lord, okay, this is a shift. I don't know what you mean. But anyway, I went to see this friend, told him the whole story. He goes, oh yeah. Didn't faze him at all. Not at all. So he shared a bit. We prayed a bit. He prayed for me. He looked in the spirit. He saw Rob in the shadows. He said, it concerned me at first when I saw him, because I didn't see the Lord with him. I didn't see any angels with him. And then he said, then I saw this little tiny ball of light. And he would pick it up and he would throw it. And then it would come back bigger. And he kept throwing it, and it would come back bigger and bigger until he was encompassed in this light. And he said that is amusing him. That's keeping his focus while he's in the shadows, right? Later that night, Rob said to me, I see a ball of light. After I came home from Phillips. He said, I see a ball of light. He said, it's us. I thought, oh my goodness. He was throwing the marriage away, and it kept coming back stronger and brighter than before. He'd throw it away, and it would come back stronger and brighter than before. Oh my goodness. So when he said that, I thought, oh my goodness, that's the ball that Philip saw when I was there just earlier. Okay. So I got home. He said, what did Philip say? I said, he totally understands. And that made him really mad. And then he was like, okay, the marriage is